What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here, and I apologise for the quite late overdue of the review for this album that I'm going to be reviewing because I've been busy and yeah, with the way I look, I unfortunately have been going through a cold, but I am going to persevere and do my best to do a new album review of this record. Today I'm going to be reviewing the latest album from the band Depeche Mode, entitled Memento Mori. This is the band's 15th studio album across their discography, and this is the first album since the release of Spirit back in 2017, marking this album Depeche Mode's first album in 6 years, released to Mute Records in the UK and Columbia Records in the US. Depeche Mode have been a band that has been a very important and influential household name within the genres into synth pop to alternative and new wave, and like with other bands around these scenes, like from the 80s, from Kraftwerk to the Human League, New Order, and many others, Depeche Mode's musical presence and acclaim still remains as one of the recognizable and celebrating sounds of music within these genres, and releasing acclaimed albums like Black Celebration to Music for the Masses, the infamous record of Violator, and Songs of Faith and Devotion, amongst many other releases. Sadly, this is the first album that has been made without their co-founder of Andy Fletcher, who sadly passed away from heart disease back in last year of 22. And the way I see this album is, I think this is one of the most personal and bravest records in this current direction and state of the band's history, and I do give the two last remaining members of Depeche Mode a lot of the love here, because this album, without any questions asked and needs to be addressed, this album is one of the best records that the band has created, and also a potential one as one of my high favourite releases of the year so far. The album's production was created by John Ford, who had done an amazing job, by the way, because not only he produced records from Florence and the Machine to Kylie Minogue, Pet Shop Boys, Arctic Monkeys, the production absolutely fits in, especially with the overall tonality and themes that were surrounding this record, because this is an album that had been in the making from the aftermath of the passing of Fletcher, but there has been a lot of the motifs around the themes of death, and especially the album's title, which is a death reference in Latin. Memento Mori not only is one of the strongest releases Depeche Mode had made, but in terms of the whole discography, this has been absolutely praised, and it truly deserves it, because I have loved a lot of what the majority of this album does continue to deliver in many listens. The first track on the album, My Cosmos Is Mine, opens things just amazingly with low distorted, industrial type noises in reverb. The bass tone comes in this presenting darkness, and vocally it sounds mellow, playing along in the setting of the instrumentation to hear some more chords placing into the music as comfortably. The beautiful tone of the music resonates and remains all the way throughout, even the changes on the keys later on when the song progresses. You can hear some more suspense as the track goes into this whole messaging. Layered synths sounded great, makes a haunting presence. The imagery to the lyrics is in like the ongoing war messaging, so it's kind of a political movement and anti-war messaging to start this record, which makes it like a dark vibe that it does provide right from the beginning to the last moments of the track. Wagging Tongue is a song which involves looping synth lead lines, which they sounded gorgeous. The mixing was perfect. The ongoing structure was heavily packed in with a lot of vocal melody, sweetly attaches the mood. Somehow it makes me wonder on a bit of like a David Bowie experimental period from the way the beat was created. Later verses go into some references to previous tracks from the early states of their career, which you can really hear that actually in later tracks as well. But with that being said, the music does continue the same pieces all throughout, but this is like on a soulful feel, and the harmonies did deliver as amazingly. The single to the album before the album's release, Ghosts Again, is stunning. It's a stunning piece of music. I love the bass notes from the keyboards, guitar notes faintly to start the song. It's creative in its rhythmic passageway, and the verses go into multiple textures, panning the sound left to right. The vocals were gentle and excellently projected with emotion and soul. It's kind of upbeat, but with the darker death motif of the lyrics adds this strong hook. And it will remain later on, I think, as one of the most beloved later tracks in Depeche Mode's history. Don't Say You Love Me. The minor key with the clean guitars did sound so good. And the mixing of this song and with the rest of the album sounded just crystal clear. The doom and gloom ambience remains in this cinematic touch of experience. The experiments added various production techniques, which makes this a strong song in itself. I love the chorus whenever it comes through. Hearing the lowest note and then higher strings sounding noises, they sounded superb, and the imagery dives in along with the disturbing heavy nature. One of my favourites on this album, and same goes with the next track, and one of the best ones, in fact, in my opinion. My favourite, Stranger. Mid-tempo direction after the first few songs, but this delivers in this wonderful blend of electronic noises and guitars. The verses go into a gloomy, deeper mark of territory in the music's ability. And not gonna lie though, like I've mentioned about the Bowie thing, makes me think on like a mid-70s radioactivity, Kraftwerk vibe. I don't know if that's the same for you guys, but that is what I have discovered through these musical ears. But nevertheless, this is one of my favourites on this album as well. The next track surprisingly makes a huge change up. Soul With Me makes this as very gospel, soul-inspired as it gets. This inspiration projects things 100%. This has a showcase with delicate vibrato through the vocals. They sounded so sweet and calm because they stand out. Lovely orchestra type of feeling. A lot of the lyrics do remain a lot of the messaging of what the theme is all about of this album, although not as heavily twisted, but I still really dig this track so much that I would maybe later see this as one of the most interesting ones at the same time. The next track, Caroline's Monkey, the beginning to this track strangely makes me think, beginning-wise, of like the Division Bell, Gilmore era-led Pink Floyd. But then later on, after the beginning of this track, the notes and the creation of the music sounded perfect and diverse. I love the hook straight away. One of my favourite pieces. But this composition remains as very repetitive, but it makes a separate story in its lyric writing. And yet alone, it's a highlight. I can't help but to fall in love with this song as well. Before We Drown, this takes things up a notch in quicker energy to follow up the last track, and lyrics speaking, I think, into the loneliness feeling and desperation in a relationship. The chorus and later changes into the chords were played beautifully, sounds fantastic, and the reverb to this one sounds mega big, all into this long, droning, prominent tone on the keyboards. People Are Good, which is another great example into a separate transition, just like with Soul With Me. This is like on a major tone, buzzing guitars and great beats, from at first being like a jumping, kicking hook to changing the tone and sound to ominous, especially in the chorus. And that's what I also really like so much of the album as a whole. There's various soundscapes of audio that sounds just as inspired and passionate. It's quite meditative when I hear this track because of the vision of these lyrics did sound honest, and same goes on to the next track of Always You. This is a set of slow, intriguing instrumentation, melancholic emotion, but this was involving in some sustained vocals, sounded engaging and rich. The texture of this one adds things into a whole other level, which I love a lot of what the album does get myself into, and it feels engaging as well. The penultimate song of the album, Never Let Me Go, very late 70s or 80s post-punky feel, kind of like something maybe like Wire in terms of when they went experimental can do something, or maybe The Cure. While I think this is less of what the sound of the album mostly is, this is like on an alternative, as I said, post-punky direction. Personally have to grow with me, but with that being said, I still think this is a very, very good song. Speak to Me. This track is one of the other strongest cuts. Ambient-driven entity of this composition dives in again onto a different group, Tangerine Dream, who are one of my other most favourite bands of all time in the electronic soundscapes. And the messaging into the lyrics can be mournful and very comfortable, but it is as personal. The vocals are absolutely and always one of the best moments. The vocals from the performances to the own emotional touches and skill, these vocals have aged so tremendously from the start to the finish, which I do give a lot of the love to Dave's vocals, because his voice has been just as iconic as a lot of the greats, but he remains as one of the powerful ones too. And while he has an interesting style of voice, he remains as one of my personal favourites, and with the involving member of Martin Gore, his involvement with Depeche Mode's musical identity, along with the previous members in Depeche Mode's history, they are just as influential and phenomenal with their own crafts and talent. And a lot of the love has to also go to the rest of the musicians who worked on this album, as James actually not only did the production, but worked with the other instruments, involving the drums to synthesizers and guitars and pedal steels. A few Italian musicians who worked with the two remaining members for Depeche Mode. Memento Mori by Depeche Mode is very thought-provoking, it's bittersweet, melancholic, and it's terrific. Yet alone, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful album to follow up Spirit, but this is one of these albums that could also be added as one of the top 10 favourites for a lot of people, and I can see why. As I said, it deserves a lot of the love and the positive acclaim. If you have not heard of this album, I highly recommend this album. I'm going to give Memento Mori by Depeche Mode a 9 out of 10. It's a very big favourite for me. It's near perfect as an album, and much love to Martin and Dave of Depeche Mode themselves. I wish them the very best to continue the legacy and their art as Depeche Mode can go on as long as they can. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos. in the near future.